Yo, I'm Sviz, and today we're going to be checking out the Zoom TKL, the second and latest offering in the Zoom lineup from Meltrix and Wucher Studios. I do want to mention that this exact configuration kit I have here is $209 shipped, just slightly above $200. This was sent out for review, but all opinions remain my own as usual. The board components come in this Meltrix carrying case, which is pretty nice considering the price point. I honestly don't use my carrying cases for boards too much, but it's nice to have them when giving them to my friends or taking them to meetups. I'm not quite sure what the material is, but it's pretty nice. Opening it up, we're greeted by the PCB in a nice little branded pouch. I'm not a fan of the insane amount of flex cuts, but it's no surprise that combining 1.2mm thick PCBs and flex cuts make for a bouncy typing experience, but at the loss of a full sound, which I'll go over later. It does have hot swap sockets, and these are particularly sharp. Actually, I'm not sure what's up with that, and there's some multi-layout support to an extent, but sadly the included one does not have 7U bottom row, which does kind of blow for me. They have mentioned that they are working on a new PCB for the WKL variant. There is Bluetooth support and 2 connectors on the underside for that, and the standard JST, as well as RGB LEDs on the sides that will be nicely diffused by the case. The board comes with 2 different feet, one that has adhesive and one that's fitted in. I'll be opting to use the white feet here as I have the lilac board. They've also included the screw-in stabs and other hardware. There's also a ton of foam to adjust to your liking. This unit is lilac, and rather than anodization, they've opted to use this nano coating. And no lie, I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's vibrant and it's consistent, but it still feels kind of weird to me. It's smooth, just a little too different for my liking and noticeably different than anodization. We can also see the diffusers on the sides here, where the RGB would shine through. If you do want to use Bluetooth, the battery is included, and you will need to plug in the respective cable, of course. I was sent their new switches as well, and man, these are incredibly smooth stock with little to no issues. They also sent me an FR4 plate, carbon fiber, and aluminum, along with the polycarbonate that was included default with mine. At checkout, you do have the option to select aluminum or polycarbonate as your default. For the external weights, I have the stainless steel mirror PVD silver and gold. Both look pretty stunning as usual, and they do have some heft to it. Assembly is pretty easy. I used the included stabs, which are pretty easy to work with, but I replaced the spacebar with a cherry clip-in. I forgot to, but if you do use certain stabs, you will want to use shims since this is a 1.2mm PCB and thinner than usual. I already know my preference and saw some other reviews, so I went ahead and taped the flex cuts in the PCB to help with sound. I'm generally not a fan of flex cuts like I've mentioned, and I don't mind having some additional stiffness even though this board is still quite soft on the bottom out. The first time I built it up with these stock Gateron CJs, which were unbelievably smooth and ready out of the box, on the carbon fiber plate and the included plate foam. I also did not screw in the plate PCB standoffs, but they're included if you would like to. Popping in the switches is pretty self-explanatory. I personally don't really do this even though it's recommended, but you can support the sockets while putting the switches in to ensure they don't break off. Opening up the case, we see our C3 unified daughter board. You'll also notice some internal blemishes, which is sadly bound to happen at this lower price point. There's also those underglow diffusers. Under the internal weight is a battery compartment. Unfortunately, this PCB wasn't working, so I didn't plug in the battery or the JST, and I instead just filled that compartment using the included foam. As tacky as it seems, my favorite part was definitely the silver mirror PVD stainless steel. To see that being offered at this price point and an internal weight is pretty insane to me, considering when I entered the hobby, literally nothing like this existed. It's super easy to work with, although it is a fingerprint magnet. One of the feet is applied via adhesive backing and the other is just fitted into the holes. Applying the other set of weights is also super simple, which come in 2 separate pieces. And here's me just absolutely memorized. And yeah, you won't see it while typing, but it does make for an interesting conversation starter with friends, and it just adds to my childish joy a little bit. Rather than traditional pour-on strips, they use these very soft kind of jackets that are pretty easy to slide on. I think I do prefer strips, but it's not a huge deal. There's no grooves for the jackets, but there are these alignment pins on the bottom case to ensure your PCB is in the right position. Then comes screwing the case back together. I tossed on a combo of DCX and Damiki Dolch since I misplaced my F row. Let's take a listen to how this sounds, and as always, please remember that sound depends on various factors, and this isn't something to rely on. First, let's get the feel out of the way. It's quite comfortable. Even with the plate foam and the flex cuts taped, it still retains a soft bottom out that I really won't get fatigued with. The angle isn't steep at all, and I could see myself using this more often if I did like the sound more. As for the sound, I think it is somewhat muted since I'm not using the case foam. The alphas with the CJs were quite nice, but the spacebar has this sort of dead, dull sound to it that I assume could be caused by the gaskets running along the whole plate essentially, rather than spaced out tabs similar to some other boards. Luckily, there's no ping whatsoever, and I don't need to try anything like force break, although that could alter the sound of course. Using the Wucher yellows that are factory lube long poles, I think it did help sound wise, but some potential changes to help it be more full sounding for my liking is no PCB and plate flex cuts and using the standard 1.6mm thickness over 1.2. Design wise, I'm a fan of this board. It offers some simple geometry that you can't really go wrong with. There's a cherry lip which is being tossed around on boards quite a bit now and becoming more popularized, reminiscent of the older cherry boards, but it still does look good here. The bezels are nice and there's some simple chamfers that aren't really catching the light a whole lot due to the finish, but nonetheless a nice touch. I wish the RGB was more of a duck style and shot somewhat to the sides a bit, but it's not a huge deal. I'm also a fan of the centered USB. If I was getting into the hobby and wanted a TKL, this would be my top choice. It has some compromises still, but the changes that are happening to the budget scene are substantial, and this has been a step up from the Zoom 65, which I think relied on PE foam considerably more. I'm happy with what Meltrix and Wucher has done, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. That's all for this one. Thanks for watching, and I hope y'all have a good one. If you enjoyed, please be sure to subscribe for more and follow my socials. Peace.